The wind came down hard from the hills that spring, thick with grit and the stink of cattle. Mabel kept her head down as she walked, one hand pressed to the swell of her belly. 7 months along, and she was still hiding, still afraid someone might recognize her face. The sack she carried wasn't food or clothes. It was coin, the last of what she had left after running all the way from Abilene. She'd stolen it. Not that it mattered now. The man she took it from had stolen more from her. She had been a preacher's wife once. Clean skirts, a soft bed, a future that looked something like peace. But the man she married had a taste for sermons that bled, for righteousness that hit like a belt. He believed he could beat the devil out of her when she cried, when she said no, when she lost the baby last winter and didn't scream enough. She ran the night. He threw her out into the snow, her feet bare, her teeth chattering as the cold swallowed her up. She thought she'd die out there, and maybe part of her had. Now, in the town of Deadbrush, no one knew her name. That's how she wanted it. Her blonde hair was hidden under a ragged scarf. Her pretty face, once the pride of her mother's church choir, looked sharp now, thinner, older. She'd aged 10 years and 6 months, and every man who looked at her now only saw what she let them. Someone broken, maybe dumb, maybe lost. That was good. Men didn't bother with women who looked like they had nothing left to give. She found shelter in the back of a stable, sleeping between sacks of grain and trying to ignore the rats. The stable hand didn't ask questions when she swept his stalls. He paid her in bread and silence. At night, she heard the piano from the saloon down the street, the shrieks of laughter, the low moans of men who didn't care if the girls they paid smiled or not. She never went inside, not even once, until the night she was dragged there. It happened quick. 1 minute she was hauling water from the well. The next, a shadow stepped behind her and everything went black. When she woke, her wrists were tied and something rough and damp covered her head. A sack. She tried to scream, but a hand closed over her mouth. Quiet, or I'll cut the baby out right here, a voice hissed. Male. Cold. She didn't know how long she was out again. But when her feet touched wood, when she smelled sweat, whiskey, and cigar smoke, she knew. The saloon. The air felt thick with heat and noise. Men laughed. Coins clinked. Someone strummed a banjo like this was just another show. A voice rang out, clear and mean. Gentlemen, what we got here ain't your average prize. She's young. She's carrying. And if you're lucky, you might get both for the price of one. Laughter. Then silence. Then a bidding war. Mabel didn't cry. She bit her tongue, so hard it bled. All she could think was who knew, who in town had seen her, figured her for easy pickings, and sold her like a mule. Was it the stable hand? The girl who gave her day-old biscuits at the back of the bakery? Someone had known. Someone had waited. The auction went fast. Too fast. $50, a man yelled. 65, another barked. 80, 90, then a pause. A silence that stretched long and slow, like a snake coiling before the strike. Then a voice she hadn't heard in months. A voice she knew better than her own. 150, it said. Calm, quiet, like it was just another Sunday sermon. Her blood turned to ice. That voice, it was her husband. She started shaking, tried to scream, to fight. But the sack held her screams in and the ropes bit into her wrists. Her heart pounded so hard she thought the whole saloon must hear it. The room hushed. Well, hell, the auctioneer muttered. Didn't think she was worth that much. The sack was ripped off, and there he was, standing at the foot of a small stage, clean as ever, wearing the same dark coat he'd worn the day he'd married her, with a Bible in one hand and something darker in his eyes. He leaned in and whispered, just loud enough for her to hear, "That's my wife." The room roared with laughter. The auctioneer looked nervous. Are you sure?" "Oh, I'm sure." Mabel couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Someone untied her hands. Rough hands. Someone else shoved her forward. She stumbled, nearly fell. He caught her, not like a man catches his wife, like a man grabbing something that belongs to him. And suddenly everything made sense. The way someone had followed her through 3 towns. The whisper she'd heard once, outside the stable, thought she imagined it. The bread with a strange taste that made her dizzy the next morning. He'd never stopped looking, and he'd never forgiven her for running. The room faded as her vision blurred. He didn't kill her that night. He was smarter than that. He waited until the men had had their laugh, until the lights had dimmed, until they were alone. And then he leaned close again and said, "You'll come home now. The Lord's given you a second chance." Mabel didn't answer. She couldn't. But deep inside, where her fear turned to something sharper, something harder, a part of her swore she'd never go home again. Not ever. Even if it meant dying. Even if it meant killing. And somewhere, just behind the ache in her ribs and the pressure in her belly, something stirred. The baby. Alive. Strong. She wasn't just running for herself anymore. She had someone to protect. And this time, she wouldn't run alone. The morning after the saloon auction, the town of Deadbrush carried on like nothing happened. No one looked at Mabel as she walked down the dusty main road beside the man who'd bought her, hand tight around her wrist. The townspeople had seen worse things. Or maybe they just learned not to ask questions that might cost them their teeth. Reverend Thorne had a calmness to him that made people nervous. His voice never rose, but his words could slice a man in two. He walked like a preacher, but when you looked in his eyes, you didn't see God. You saw something empty. A man who'd buried too much, lost too much, and come to love the sound of his own sermons more than the voice of the Lord. His flock back in Abilene called him righteous. Mabel knew better. He was clever, patient, and cruel. A man who used the Bible like a weapon. He brought her to the edge of town, to a boarding house run by a woman named Mrs. Van Gilder. Widow, sharp eyes, kept to herself. She didn't ask who Mabel was. Just took the Reverend's coin, handed over a room key, and left without a word. But not before she gave Mabel a look. Just a flicker of something in her eyes. Pity maybe, or warning. The Reverend didn't stay long. He had business elsewhere, he said. A funeral to officiate in Fort Baxter. He'd be back in 3 days. Until then, Mabel was to stay inside, rest, and think hard about the kind of mother she wanted to be. Then he kissed her forehead like they were sweethearts, closed the door, and left. Mabel waited 5 full minutes before she moved. She tried the window, nailed shut, then the door, locked from the outside. But the walls were thin enough to hear someone moving in the room next door. She knocked once, then twice. Silence, then a soft knock back. That night, after midnight, she heard the whisper through the wall. A woman's voice. "You the one from the saloon?" Mabel hesitated. "Yes." "Then need to get out of there. He don't come back to collect things he don't plan on keeping." The voice belonged to a woman named Amelia. Lived in the room next door. Said she'd worked in the saloon once, before the bruises got too hard to hide. Now she cleaned rooms and kept secrets. Her story was full of holes. She said she'd come west to be a nurse. Then later said she'd trained horses in Kansas. The truth was probably somewhere in between. But Amelia had kindness in her. A low, steady voice. Eyes that didn't flinch when they saw the scar on Mabel's temple. And Amelia wasn't the only one watching. Across town, a man named Eli Maddox sat in the sheriff's office, booted feet up on the desk, staring at the crack in the ceiling. He wasn't the sheriff. Not anymore. But he kept the chair warm when the real lawman, Sheriff Vickers, went drinking down at the creek, which was often. Eli had been a deputy once, then a bounty hunter. Now he was just the man people called when things got messy. He'd seen Mabel 2 nights before the auction, alone at the well. Looked familiar, he thought. Something about the way she moved, like she was used to being hurt. He'd also seen the Reverend arrive in town a week before that, slipping into the general store with a list in one hand and a set of questions in the other. Questions about a pregnant woman. Blonde, quiet, lost. Eli knew the type. Men who used God as a mask. He'd hunted worse. So he watched. When the auction happened, he was too late to stop it, but not too late to take note of every man in the room. Not too late to see the flash of something strange on the Reverend's face when he claimed the woman. Not lust, not even anger, satisfaction. Eli didn't like that, so he waited too. He knew the Reverend would leave town soon. And when he did, Eli would find out what kind of man bought his wife like cattle. What none of them knew, not Amelia, not Eli, not even the Reverend, was that Mabel wasn't just someone running. She had taken something. Back in Abilene, the Reverend had a locked chest beneath his bed. Inside were pages of letters, most written in his hand, some written in a different script altogether. Notes, codes, names, men who paid him to keep their secrets, women who paid him to make their sins disappear. A list of every lie he'd buried behind a pulpit. Mabel had taken 2 pages. She didn't even know what they said, only that they were hidden behind a false bottom and marked with a red wax seal. She took them the night she ran, thinking they might be worth something. Now they burned a hole in her bag like fire, and someone else wanted them. A few towns over, a man with a scar across his lip rode west with a letter in his pocket and a bounty slip with no name. Just a description. Female, mid-20s, pregnant, traveling alone. Stole something valuable. He didn't care what she took. Just knew someone wanted her back bad enough to pay double. The Reverend hadn't come alone after all. He'd sent others. Shadows who would smile at you in the street, then slit your throat in the dark. And now they were closing in. Back at the boarding house, Amelia slipped Mabel a bread roll and a folded piece of paper. Map of the town. There's a trap door under the rug in the parlor. Leads to the root cellar. From there, a tunnel under the street to the undertaker's barn. Only runs one way. Mabel stared at her. Why are you helping me? Amelia's face turned quiet. Because I had a sister once. She didn't say more. That night, Mabel waited until the boards creaked soft and steady, and she knew Amelia had gone to sleep. Then she slipped the map into her apron, tied her boots, and eased her hand to her belly. Almost time, she whispered, but the door creaked before she reached it. And standing in the frame was Eli Maddox. One hand on his pistol, one eyebrow raised. Going somewhere. Mabel froze. Eli didn't look angry. Didn't look surprised either. He stepped inside, shut the door behind him, and leaned back against it. I ain't here to take you back, he said. But I am here to ask why the man who bought you smiled like he'd already won a war. She didn't speak. Look, Eli said, I've seen a lot of people do a lot of bad things. But I got a rule. When someone starts buying wise at auctions, I stop waiting for permission to get involved. Mabel held his gaze. Then slowly, carefully, she reached in her bag and pulled out one of the folded pages. Eli took it, read it. His face changed. The name on the letter, Judge Albert Morrow. Abilene, a man with 10 years on the bench and twice that many skeletons in his closet. The letter spoke of a bribe, a missing witness, a hanging that was never supposed to happen. This real? Eli asked. Mabel nodded. There's more. Eli exhaled. You need to disappear. That man, he won't stop. But if this letter gets out, he might not have time to keep chasing you. They both knew it wasn't enough. The Reverend wanted her gone not just because of the papers. He wanted her quiet. He wanted her afraid. Eli handed the letter back. You go tonight. I'll stall whoever comes asking. Mabel swallowed. And what about you? Eli smiled faintly. I'm already a dead man in this town. Might as well be useful on the way out. Before she left, Amelia appeared in the hallway, arms folded. You better make it, girl. I will, Mabel said. And for the first time since she'd run barefoot into the snow that night in Abilene, she almost believed it. The trapdoor was colder than Mabel expected, the air beneath it thick with the smell of damp earth and old dust. She moved slow, one hand gripping the map Amelia had given her, the other on her belly. The baby stirred again. She whispered to it as she moved, more to keep herself steady than anything. We're almost through, but she wasn't sure if that was a promise or a lie. The tunnel was tighter than she imagined. She crawled on hands and knees through the dark, following the faint scratches on the stone. Marks Amelia must have carved years ago to guide herself out. Every sound made Mabel flinch. Dirt shifting, a creak of wood somewhere above. Footsteps? Or just her nerves unraveling? She reached the end of the tunnel, pushed through the loose boards, and found herself in the undertaker's barn. Horses shuffled in their stalls. The scent of hay masked the rot that always hung faint in a place that kept the dead close. She crouched behind a barrel and waited, heart thumping loud enough to rattle her ribs. Then she heard it, boots outside. Voices. 2 of them. She was here, a man said. They found the lock busted. Reckon she's in the tunnel, another answered. We blocked the end. Smoke her out. Panic gripped her, but then a sharp bang rang out. A shout, and more gunfire. Then silence. Eli. He'd stalled them just like he said he would. She ran. She found the stable at the far end of town, the same one where she'd once slept between sacks of grain. The boy who worked there was gone. The stall doors creaked in the wind. She grabbed a saddlebag, filled it with oats and apples, and slipped into the shadows. But someone was already waiting. A man with a scar along his lip. Dark hat, long coat. He stepped out from behind the trough like he'd been expecting her. Mrs. Thorne, he said smoothly. Been a long ride finding you. She froze. Don't try to run, he said. I'm not here to hurt you. Just need the papers. Mabel's throat went dry. They're not for you, she said. They're not for you either, he replied. You're carrying trouble that don't belong to you. He pulled a small knife from his coat, not threatening, just cleaning his nails. But it was enough. She stepped back. I can disappear, she said. I've done it before. The man smiled. Lady, you don't disappear. You leave a trail of fire. Then a noise behind them. A gun cocking. Eli, step away, he growled. Now. The man lifted his hands slowly. This ain't your fight, Maddox. Wrong again, Eli said. This whole damn town became my fight when they auctioned off a pregnant woman like a mule. The man took a step. Eli shot him in the leg. Mabel jumped, the sound ringing in her ears. The man crumpled, groaning. Eli turned to her, jaw clenched. We need to go. Now. But something shifted in Mabel's eyes. No, she said. I'm tired of running. She bent down and picked up the man's knife. Eli frowned. What are you doing? I need to know why this is happening, she said. All of it. The papers. The Reverend. The names. What do they want to bury so badly? Eli hesitated, then nodded. They dragged the man into the stable, tied him to a post, and waited. After a while, the bleeding slowed and the man started talking. Turns out, the letters Mabel stole weren't just blackmail, they were insurance. The Reverend hadn't just been collecting dirt on people. He'd been working for someone, Judge Morrow, a circle of men trading favors, money, and justice for silence. One of the names on the list was a railroad commissioner. Another, a deputy marshal. The papers Mabel had were just 2 pieces of a much larger puzzle. And Reverend Thorne? He was supposed to keep the evidence locked away. Safe. Hidden. But when he found out his wife had taken it, he panicked. Not because he cared about her, because she could ruin everything. He'd sent the bounty hunters, paid the auctioneer, even bribed the sheriff in dead brush. He needed her gone. Buried. Not out of vengeance, but fear. Eli shook his head as the truth poured out. This ain't about you anymore, Mabel. This is about half the damn territory. But that didn't matter to her. What mattered was this. She'd been hunted, broken, bought. And the man behind it all, her husband, wasn't done. Not yet. The next day, the sky turned black with clouds. A storm coming. Eli and Mabel rode east, toward Fort Baxter. That's where the Reverend was headed. Where he'd told her he'd be. A funeral, he'd said. But it was more than that. He was going to meet with Judge Morrow. Hand off the last of the papers. Seal the deal. Maybe disappear for good. They rode hard. Fast. Mabel leaned against Eli in the saddle, one hand wrapped around her belly. Every hour felt heavier. The baby shifted more often. The pressure in her lower back burned. But she didn't say anything. They reached Fort Baxter by nightfall. It was a cleaner town. Whitewashed houses. Soldiers posted at the gates. And a church in the middle, tall and proud. He was there. They saw him stepping out of the church, coat flapping in the wind, Bible in one hand. And in the other, Mabel saw it, a small leather folder. The rest of the letters. She dismounted. "Wait," Eli said. "We don't have a plan." "I do," she said. She walked straight up to the church. Thorne saw her coming and smiled. "You finally understand," he said. "The Lord brought you back to me." She slapped him. Hard. The sound echoed through the square. "Don't speak for God," she said. "He left you a long time ago." He looked stunned, then angry. "You're nothing without me," he snapped. "You're a stain, a failure, a thief." "I'm a mother," she said. She pulled the folder from his hands. He lunged for her. Eli shot the ground near his feet. Soldiers turned. Townsfolk gathered. Everything froze. Mabel raised the folder. "These are records," she said loud, "of what this man did, what he helped cover up. I'm done hiding." Thorne stepped back. "You don't want to do this," he said. "You'll make enemies you can't run from." "I'm not running," she said. "I'm naming names." Eli walked to her side, and for a moment, the Reverend looked almost afraid. But that fear twisted into something darker. "You won't survive this," he said. "I'll see to that." But then a new voice rang out. "Amelia." She stepped from the crowd, a revolver in her hand. "No," she said. "You won't." And behind her came others. Faces Mabel barely recognized. Girls from the saloon, the baker's wife, even a stable hand. People who'd been hurt, lied to, sold. They stood in the street, silent, solid. The Reverend's face changed again. He saw the tide turning, and he ran. He didn't get far. The soldiers grabbed him. Someone handed over the folder. The name Judge Morrow echoed through the crowd like a gunshot. It was over. Almost. Mabel sat on the steps of the church, clutching her belly as the first pains hit. Eli dropped beside her. "You all right?" She nodded, barely breathing. "It's time." Amelia ran inside to fetch help. Hours later, as the storm broke and rain swept across the rooftops, a cry rose from the back room of the church. A new cry. Small, fierce, alive. Mabel held the baby close, tears streaming down her face. "You're safe now," she whispered. "We're safe." But she knew it wasn't really over. The men in those letters, some were still free, still powerful, still dangerous. But now, she had something they didn't. The truth. And she wasn't afraid anymore. It started with a telegram. One Eli never should have seen. He wasn't trying to spy. He was just waiting at the post office, checking for a reply from a Marshall friend in Wichita, when the clerk slid the wrong envelope across the counter. Eli opened it without thinking, scanned the paper, and froze. Funds delivered. Mabel confirmed. Document retrieval pending. Thorne promised she'll be alone. He read it again. The words didn't change. When he stepped out into the sun, the heat felt different, sickly. Everything slowed. His boots hit the boards heavy, the world off balance. He looked down the street toward the church where Mabel was nursing the baby, rocking gently in the same pew where she'd once begged God for an escape. Had she known? Had she used him? He wanted to turn back, to ask. But something ugly crawled up his throat, and he couldn't move. That night, he didn't return to the boarding house. Mabel waited, confused, the baby restless in her arms. Amelia came by to help with feeding, but Mabel sent her away early, her thoughts knotted too tight. Something had shifted. She could feel it. Eli had looked at her, strange the last few days, softer, but also like he was studying her. Not in love, in doubt. The next morning, Amelia stormed in. "He left," she said, not bothering to sit. "Packed up before dawn. Didn't say where." Mabel stared. "No, that doesn't make sense." "Maybe not to you," Amelia said, arms crossed. "But to the rest of us, it always ends the same. Men say they're different. Then they disappear when things get hard." Mabel clutched the baby tighter. But Amelia wasn't done. "Don't act surprised. You had secrets too. You still do." Mabel blinked. "What are you talking about?" Amelia leaned in. "That letter. The one you never showed me. The one from that man in Kansas. What's in it?" Mabel's mouth went dry. Amelia's eyes narrowed. "You want to trust people? Start there." But Mabel didn't answer. Couldn't. "Amelia," left with a slam of the door. She was alone again. By sundown, word spread. The judge had been found dead in his hotel room, poisoned, and the folder of names? Gone. Someone had beaten them to it. Panic rippled through Fort Baxter. People packed up wagons, locked their doors, stopped talking in public. Anyone with power now looked behind them when they walked. Mabel sat by the window, holding her child. Her body ached. Her hands trembled. This wasn't justice. This was the beginning of something worse. Then a knock at the door. She opened it and found Sheriff Crane standing there, hat in hand. "We need to talk," he said. She didn't invite him in, but he stepped inside anyway. "There's a rumor going around," he said. "One says you were working for Thorne this whole time, that this was some long con. Letters. Baby. All of it." Mabel didn't flinch. "It's a lie." He tilted his head. "Then maybe you can explain this." He held up a copy of the telegram Eli had seen. Mabel stared at it. The baby began to cry, but she couldn't move. "I didn't send this," she whispered. "I never even saw it. Somebody sent it from this town," he said. "Under your name." Her chest felt tight. Her head spun. "Where's Eli?" she asked. Crane frowned. "That's what I'd like to know." Later, after he left, she found the letter Amelia had mentioned, the one she'd hidden. She unfolded it with shaking hands. It was from a man named Prescott, dated 2 months earlier. "Your husband paid me to find the girl you used to be, the one from the asylum. Thought you want to know. The child you lost? He buried the records. Said you weren't right in the head. I didn't take the money." Her knees buckled. That was it. The secret she'd buried so deep, she'd almost made herself forget. Before Thorne, before the small-town preacher's wife mask, she had been locked away. Not because she was mad, but because her father couldn't handle a daughter who saw too much. When she met Thorne, she thought he'd saved her. But he'd only taken her from one prison to another. The asylum, the baby, the silence. All of it came roaring back. She didn't sleep that night, or the next. By the third day, Fort Baxter was a different place. The judge's death triggered something bigger than anyone expected. Another name from the list, Marshall Tolan, was arrested in Denver. A banker in Abilene shot himself, and someone torched the Dead Brush saloon to the ground. Reverend Thorne vanished. Eli stayed gone. Amelia stopped coming. And Mabel? She stopped trying to feel anything at all, until the knock came. Again. But this time, it wasn't the sheriff. It was the man with the scarred lip, the one Eli had shot. He stood in the doorway, one arm in a sling. "You think this is over?" he said. Mabel didn't answer. "You started a fire, the kind that don't stop burning, and now people are paying for it." He reached into his coat and tossed something onto the floor. A locket. Her locket. The one she'd lost in the snow, back before the auction. Back when she was still just a woman trying to survive. "I should kill you," he said. "But someone else paid me more to watch you suffer." She didn't flinch. He spat on the porch and walked away. But he left the locket behind. That night, the baby wouldn't stop crying. Mabel paced the floor, singing softly, tears in her voice. Everything was coming undone. Everyone was gone. And for the first time, she questioned herself. Had she ruined lives by exposing the truth? Had the price been worth it? The baby finally slept. Mabel sat by the window again, holding the locket, the letter, the telegram, all the pieces of her unraveling life, and wondered how many times a person could be broken before they didn't come back together. In the street below, thunder rolled. The storm had returned, and with it came Amelia. She burst in, soaked eyes wide. "They found Eli," she said. Mabel's heart jumped. Amelia took a breath. "He's alive, but barely. They beat him, dumped him outside town with a note pinned to his coat." Mabel stared. Amelia stepped closer. The note said, "This is your warning. Next time it's the girl." Mabel didn't hesitate. She packed the baby, the letters, the locket, and left with Amelia into the night. The ride was long, and Eli looked worse than she imagined. His face was swollen, his hands broken, but his eyes still open when he saw her. "You shouldn't have come," he croaked. "I always come back," she said, and this time she meant it. He reached for her hand. "I thought you lied to me," he whispered. "About the baby, about the letters." "I did," she said. "A little. I was scared." He smiled faintly. "So was I." Outside, the wind howled. The world was burning, falling apart at the seams. But in that room, something still held. Not hope. Not yet. But maybe something like it. And that would have to be enough for now. The storm didn't let up for 3 days. Wind tore at the roof. Rain turned the dirt roads to sludge, and thunder cracked like gunfire overhead. Inside the shack where they'd hidden Eli, the walls groaned with every gust. But Mabel didn't flinch. She sat at his bedside, holding a cold cloth to his head, the baby sleeping in a basket by the fire. Her own body was worn thin, hands blistered, eyes shadowed. She hadn't eaten more than scraps. But something inside her wouldn't break, not yet. Amelia came and went with news. Whispers from the street said Thorne had returned. Not to Fort Baxter, but somewhere worse. Red Hollow, a mining town north of the ridge. It was a lawless place, full of men who didn't ask questions and would kill for coin. Word was Thorne was holed up there with what was left of the papers, and with Morrow dead, he was making his own play now. No more hiding behind the church robes. No more pretending to serve God. And he wasn't alone. He brought with him 2 men who once rode with the Kansas Death Riders. Bounty hunters turned mercenaries. He had gold. He had names. And worst of all, he had a plan to rebuild what had crumbled under Mabel's hand. A new network. A new silence. Eli knew it before anyone said it. "He's going to bury the truth again," he rasped. "Unless someone finishes what we started." Mabel didn't speak, but she didn't have to. Her mind was already past the point of turning back. That night, she left the baby with Amelia and rode out before dawn. Alone. No saddlebag. No second horse. Just the coat on her back and the pistol Eli had given her before he passed out again. She didn't tell Amelia why, but Amelia saw it in her eyes. This wasn't a visit. It was war. Red Hollow loomed in the valley like a wound. Black smoke, crooked buildings, the air thick with coal dust and the stink of blood. Men leaned against posts, whiskey in one hand, knives in the other. Nobody smiled. Mabel walked into the saloon with mud up to her knees, her hair soaked, the pistol tucked into the waist of her skirt. Inside, everything went quiet. She scanned the room, and there he was, Reverend Thorne, no longer wearing the collar. His beard was gone. His eyes were colder. And across the table from him sat 2 men with the look of wolves, one missing an ear, the other with fingers broken at strange angles. Thorne looked up. He didn't act surprised. "Mabel," he said, leaning back. "You look tired." She stepped forward, not blinking. "Give me the papers," she said. He laughed. Not loud. More like a cough laced with bitterness. "I burned them," he said. "Every last one." She didn't believe him. And he knew it. "But it doesn't matter," he continued. "The truth won't save you. It never does. You think these men care about justice? They care about gold. About power. Same as you." "I don't want power," she said. "I want to end this." He stood slowly, a snake uncoiling. "You ended it the moment you opened your mouth. The moment you ran. Now look what you've caused. A judge dead. A town in ruin. A child born into chaos." Her jaw clenched. "You speak of chaos like you didn't start it. I saved you," he hissed. "I found you broken. I gave you a name. A home. You repaying me with betrayal. You didn't save me. You caged me." His hand twitched near his belt. The room held its breath. Then one of the mercenaries stood, bored. "Kill her or don't," he said. "But if you drag this out, I'm charging extra." And that's when she moved. Fast. The gun came up, cracked once. The mercenary dropped. Blood pooled at his feet. Everything exploded. Chairs overturned. Shots fired. Screams. She ducked behind a table, pistol smoking, heart thundering her chest. She could barely hear through the ringing in her ears. Thorne fired blindly. Glass shattered. Another body dropped. Mabel rolled, reloaded, stood, and found herself face to face with her husband. He was holding a derringer, pointed at her chest. They froze like that, both breathing hard. "You won't shoot me," he said. "I already did," she replied and fired. The bullet hit him in the shoulder. He stumbled back, shocked. Dropped the gun. She walked over, stood above him. "I loved you once," she said, voice shaking, "but I love my child more." He looked up at her, blood in his mouth. "You think killing me will fix this?" he said. "You'll always be what I made you." She raised the pistol again and stopped, fingers trembling. She couldn't. Not because he didn't deserve it, but because if she did, he'd still win. He'd pull her down with him. She turned, walked out, and didn't look back. The papers were gone, the names lost, but she had the baby, and a voice that had once been taken, now hers again. She rode back to Fort Baxter under sky that finally broke open. Not with rain, but light. The kind that comes after the storm, when everything's stripped down to the bone. Eli was awake. Amelia sat at his side, quiet. When Mabel stepped into the room, Eli's eyes found hers. "Did you do it?" he asked. She nodded once. "It's over." He didn't smile, but he reached for her hand. "You made a choice," he said. "One no one else could make." She sat beside him, and for the first time in years, she cried. Not out of fear, but relief. The cost had been steep, but she was free. The town didn't go back to normal. Not really. Places like Fort Baxter don't heal in straight lines. They don't forget who ran when things got ugly or who stayed and bled. People talked less. Eyes lingered longer. Doors stayed locked after sundown. But little by little, things settled just enough to pretend. They buried 3 men that week. One was a rancher who got caught in the crossfire. Another was the mercenary Mabel shot. The third was Reverend Thorne. His body was found by a trapper 3 days after Red Hollow burned to the ground. No one claimed him. No one prayed over him. They put him in the earth near the rocks behind the chapel, where the weeds grew thick. No headstone, just dirt and silence. The sheriff didn't bother writing a report. Mabel didn't go to the burial. She stayed home, rocking her daughter in a chair by the window, humming a lullaby she couldn't quite remember the words to. The girl had Eli's eyes, big, brown, steady, and sometimes, when Mabel was half asleep, she thought she saw her younger self staring back at her. That girl was gone now, buried deeper than Thorne. Eli recovered slowly. He walked with a limp, fingers crooked from the beatings, but he was alive. And he smiled more now, softer, like someone who'd walked through fire and didn't expect to come out whole. He didn't ask Mabel for promises. He didn't offer any either. What they had wasn't the kind that came with rings or ceremonies. It was quieter. A look, a touch, a shared silence that said, "I see you, and I'm not leaving." Amelia reopened her little laundry shack. She took 'em more girls, gave them shelter, work, and clean clothes. But something in her had changed too. She didn't laugh as loud, didn't forgive as easily. She'd watched too many people use faith like a blade. She kept a Bible on her shelf, but never opened it again. The baby, who Mabel named Miriam, grew strong. Curious. She liked to pull Eli's hat down over her eyes and laugh like it was the best joke in the world. Sometimes strangers would see them in town, Mabel with a basket, Eli holding the child, and they'd look confused, like the picture didn't fit the story they'd been told. But that was the thing. Most people only understood part of it. The easy parts, the headlines. Woman brings down preacher. Baby born in snow. Auction survivor exposes conspiracy. They never printed the part where she almost lost herself, where she was half a breath from becoming the very thing she fought against. One day, late spring, Mabel found the old telegram again, the one with her name forged at the bottom. She almost threw it in the fire, but something stopped her. She folded it, tucked it into the back of the baby's keepsake box, and shut the lid. Let her daughter decide someday whether the truth mattered. Let her carry it if she chose. A month later, a man came into town asking questions. Said he was a government investigator. Said he'd heard rumors of missing judges, dead marshals, and a woman who brought a network of corruption to its knees. Mabel met him in the parlor of the boarding house. He was clean-cut, polite, wore a union pin on his collar like it meant something. "I want to write your story," he said. She sipped her tea. It's already been written. You just didn't read the hard parts. He looked confused. You expose monsters, he said. That matters. Mabel shook her head. I expose people, she replied. Some are monsters. Some were scared. Some were just trying to feed their families. Still, he said, leaning forward, what you did, it's redemption. She looked at him for a long time, then set her tea down gently. I didn't do it to be redeemed. And she stood up and walked out. He left town the next morning, empty-handed. That summer, the rains came late. The crops dried up, and folks grumbled about punishment and signs from God. Mabel kept to herself, worked the garden, read to Miriam in the shade, wrote letters she never sent. Sometimes, at night, she would sit beside Eli on the porch and listen to the crickets sing like nothing had ever gone wrong. One evening, Amelia joined them. She lit a cigarette, leaned against the rail, and said, You ever wonder what it all meant? Everything we went through. Mabel watched the smoke curl up into the fading sky. No, she said quietly. I just wonder if it was enough. Amelia looked at her. To make it right, Mabel shook her head. To keep her safe. They sat like that a while. The world spun. The baby cried. A dog barked in the distance. Someone played a fiddle 2 streets over, out of tune but heartfelt. It was peace. Not clean, not easy, but real. And that had to be enough. Years passed. The baby grew tall. The story faded. A new preacher came, kind and forgettable. People forgot the name Thorn. The papers yellowed. The saloon was rebuilt. Then, one quiet morning, long after Eli's hair turned gray and Amelia was buried in the southern field, Miriam found the keepsake box. Inside, beneath old photos and scraps of ribbon, she found the telegram. She read it once, twice, then looked at her mother, older now, slow-moving but still sharp. Is this real? Miriam asked. Mabel met her daughter's eyes. Steady, calm. It was once, she said, but it doesn't have to be yours. Miriam stared at the paper a long while. Then, slowly, she set in the fire. The flames ate the words without fuss. And Mabel smiled, for the first time in weeks. Because sometimes justice doesn't come from dragging the past into the light. Sometimes it's in letting it burn and choosing something better with what's left, even if it costs you everything, even if no one knows your name. The crops dried up, and folks grumbled about punishment and signs from God. Mabel kept to herself, worked the garden, read to Miriam in the shade, wrote letters she never sent. Sometimes at night, she would sit beside Eli on the porch and listen to the crickets sing like nothing had ever gone wrong. One evening, Amelia joined them. She lit a cigarette, leaned against the rail, and said, You ever wonder what it all meant? Everything we went through. Mabel watched the smoke curl up into the fading sky. No, she said quietly. I just wonder if it was enough. Amelia looked at her. To make it right, Mabel shook her head. To keep her safe. They sat like that a while. The world spun. The baby cried. A dog barked in the distance. Someone played a fiddle 2 streets over, out of tune but heartfelt. It was peace. Not clean, not easy, but real. And that had to be enough. Years passed. The baby grew tall. The story faded. A new preacher came, kind and forgettable. People forgot the name Thorn. The papers yellowed. The saloon was rebuilt. Then, one quiet morning, long after Eli's hair turned gray and Amelia was buried in the southern field, Miriam found the keepsake box. Inside, beneath old photos and scraps of ribbon, she found the telegram. She read it once, twice, then looked at her mother, older now, slow-moving but still sharp. Is this real? Miriam asked. Mabel met her daughter's eyes. Steady, calm. It was once, she said, but it doesn't have to be yours. Miriam stared at the paper a long while. Then, slowly, she set in the fire. The flames ate the words without fuss. And Mabel smiled, for the first time in weeks. Because sometimes justice doesn't come from dragging the past into the light. Sometimes it's in letting it burn and choosing something better with what's left, even if it costs you everything, even if no one knows your name.